The oldest songs in Middle-earth do not name him. They speak of great kings and terrible wars. They recall fire in the east, light in the west, and the long fall of proud towers into dust. But of him, no verses remain. No prophecy marks his coming. No tale recalls his origin. And yet, in a time before stone knew shaping and before fire knew purpose, he was already walking, not striding with the fury of warriors, not drifting like the ghosts of the dead, but singing. His footsteps stirred no fear. His presence called no followers. Yet the ground knew him, and the trees leaned gently as he passed, not out of duty or fear, but recognition. The rivers hummed his tune. The wind carried his name, not spoken, but known. He was not born in Valinor, nor summoned by Ilúvatar. He did not cross the sea with the elves, nor did he wake in Hildorian with the first men. He simply was. A presence, a breath in the fabric of the world so old and so deep that even the wise dared not measure it. He wore no crown, he carried no staff, he bore no sigil of house or kindred. And yet there was power in him, not the power to command, nor to conquer, nor to destroy, but the older kind, the kind that did not need to prove itself, the kind that simply endured. Tom Bombadil, a name that feels like laughter echoing in a place where no laughter should be, a riddle that does not ask for an answer. He lived in a house nestled in a fold of the old forest, where the paths turned strange and maps grew shy, a place where hobbits did not go, and where even the shadows forgot to spread. He sang to the hills, he named the trees, he danced with Goldberry beneath the starlight that had seen the first breath of ardor. He laughed at thunder and skipped stones across rivers that had not yet been charted. The world moved forward with dread and memory and loss, but Tom remained. When Frodo and his companions passed into the old forest, fleeing the creeping shadow of the Nine, it was Tom who found them, lost, frightened, nearly consumed by the long dead. He welcomed them with songs, fed them with mushrooms, told no tales of sorrow, wore no grim face, and when they asked of the One Ring, he held it in his hand, tossed it into the air, and laughed. The ring, so heavy with history, so poisonous to kings and wizards, did nothing. It did not tempt him. It could not reach him. It wasn't that he resisted its pull. He simply never noticed it pulling. The wise would later wonder at this. Gandalf would caution against giving Tom the ring, not because he might fall to it, but because he might misplace it, or worse, forget it entirely. He existed so wholly outside the struggle of power that even the greatest weapon in Middle-earth meant nothing to him. But that is not the same as being harmless. There are rumors, quiet ones, found not in the published pages, but buried in the drafts, the bones of Tolkien's early thought. In those older tellings, the Nazgûl, servants of shadow, approached the borders of Tom's land. They came in silence, as they always did, cloaked, hooded, hunting. And when they neared the house, they stopped, not because they were halted, not because they were attacked, but because Tom turned. He looked at them. That was all, and they did not pass. No incantation, no fire, no flash of sword or flame, just the turning of a face that had seen the beginning and would outlast the end, a gaze that did not judge or command or even resist, because it did not need to. And so they stopped, and they watched, and then they turned away. In the deep places of Middle-earth, there are powers that burn, powers that corrupt, powers that bend the will and shape the world to their desire. But there is one power that does none of these things, one presence that walks barefoot through the trees, humming songs that only the wind remembers, utterly disinterested in crowns and wars and endings. That power is not the kind that rules. It is the kind that remains. The stars above the Shire flickered low that night, veiled in a thin smoke that carried no scent and left no trail. The world held its breath, and the roads lay quiet beneath a sky that forgot how to shine. There was no warning, no trumpet from the east, only hoofbeats, heavy, hollow, falling like distant war drums upon the earth. They did not gallop. The Nazgûl never galloped when they hunted. There was no need. The scent of the ring lingered in the air like something wounded, something trying to hide its pain. Thin, cold, unmistakable. Two of them came this way, two riders in black. They rode without sound beyond the beat of hooves. No metal clinked, no voice whispered. Their cloaks hung like torn banners of a forgotten war, fluttering without wind. The horses beneath them, bred in the dark halls of forgotten places, made no protest as they passed under twisted boughs and roots that rose like ribs from the soil. They had followed signs to the borders of the old forest, and now they crossed them. The trees did not greet them. They did not sway, did not bend, did not speak. They simply stood, watching. This forest was old. Old in a way the Nine had not known in life. Its memory was not of men or cities or stone halls lit by firelight, but of the deep song, the one that came before language, the one the world sang before the firstborn awoke under the stars. Here, that song still murmured beneath the roots, in tones so slow, even time dared not interrupt them. And yet the Nazgûl pressed forward, as they always had. They knew no fear. They had given it away, long ago, for power. But the forest did not move aside. It closed. The path narrowed, though no branches fell. The air thickened, though the wind was still. Their vision, already twisted by their half-life between the worlds, grew stranger. The shapes of trees began to blur into the shapes of watchers. Every shadow seemed to hold a face. Still, they did not stop. They had tracked the scent of the ring across marshes, over stone, beneath the hills. They had torn down men, undone warriors, shattered towers. This forest would be no different. They passed through a narrow grove where the mist hung low and pale mushrooms glowed faintly in the underbrush. Their horses, once tireless, began to slow, not faltering, but hesitating. Then the mist parted, and there it was, a house nestled not atop the forest, but within it, grown, not built. Its roof curved like a hill, its walls breathed like bark. The chimney smoked, but not with fire. The light inside pulsed like a heartbeat, and in front of it, he stood, barefoot on the grass, a feathered hat resting lazily on his brow. His blue coat caught the light in ways it should not have, shifting from sky to shadow. Yellow boots pressed into the soil like roots. He did not speak. He did not gesture. He simply looked, and something in the world paused. The horses reared, not in terror, but confusion. The riders tightened their grip, though their hands did not tremble. But the earth beneath them no longer belonged to the world they had conquered. It sang a different tune, and they did not know the words. Tom Bombadil looked at them, not with hatred, not even with challenge, with awareness, the kind of gaze that had no beginning, the kind that did not fear death because it had seen it arrive and depart too many times to care. The ring sang within their cloaks, a high, desperate note, but it rang hollow here, like a voice shouting in a chamber that does not echo. One of the Nazgûl lifted his hooded head, as if trying to see more clearly. But there was no veil to part. There was no veil at all. They simply did not belong here. The man in yellow boots took a single step forward. His foot pressed the grass down gently, and where he stepped, even the shadow seemed to hesitate. No blade was drawn, no fire lit, and yet the Nazgûl turned, not swiftly, not chaotically, but with the motion of something that had reached the end of its path and could go no farther. Their horses wheeled in silence. Their cloaks faded between the trees. They left. Tom Bombadil turned as well, not with triumph, not with concern, but as though the moment had passed like weather, and now it was time to go inside. He opened the wooden door, hummed something half-sung and half-forgotten, and vanished into the warm light. The trees sighed. The mist retreated. The house breathed. And somewhere behind it all, the forest remembered that the darkest thing in the world had once come to its edge and could not cross. Power in Middle-earth always comes at a cost. To rule is to burn. To hold is to hunger. Even the wise feel its weight, and the strong bend beneath its crown. Fëanor, brightest of the elves, was consumed by the fire he lit with his own hands. Isildur, heir of great kings, was undone by a single moment of pride. Even Gandalf, kind and old and grey, would not dare take the ring, not because he lacked the strength, but because he knew it would twist that strength into tyranny. And yet there was one who did not fear the ring, one who did not resist it, because he did not need to. Tom Bombadil. When Frodo offered him the ring, Tom took it with a chuckle, flipped it in the air like a coin, and watched it vanish on his finger, not through magic, but mischief. A trick, a joke. It was the most dangerous artifact in the world. To him, it was nothing. Not a whisper stirred in his mind. Not a shadow moved behind his smile. The ring did not want him because he could not be moved. This is the paradox that troubled even the wise. If he was immune to the ring, should he not guard it? If he could not be corrupted, should he not bear it? But Gandalf, ever perceptive, refused the suggestion. Not because Tom might fall, but because Tom might forget. He might toss it aside, leave it on a windowsill, or bury it beneath a singing root. It meant nothing to him, and that very indifference made him the most untrustworthy guardian of all. For Tom did not see the world in terms of victory or defeat. He saw only being. The trees grew, the river ran, the song went on. That was enough. He had no stake in the wars of elves and men. He knew of them, certainly. Perhaps he had watched them rise, burn, and crumble from the shade of an ancient oak. But he never stepped in, not because he was bound by fear, but because he simply did not belong to the pattern. This is what set him apart. Sauron sought dominion, through fear, through corruption, through the binding of wills. Tom sought none of it. He ruled nothing. Yet within his small realm, no shadow could stretch, no malice take root. The Barrow Wights, ancient spirits of forgotten wars, fled from his voice. The Nazgûl, chained to darkness and driven by Sauron's command, could not pass his door. Not because he cast them out, not because he battled them, but because he did not answer. Power, in all its forms, demands engagement. It wants to be challenged, answered, reflected. Tom Bombadil gave it silence, not the silence of fear, the silence of disregard. It is a power more unsettling than any spell or sword, because it cannot be reasoned with, it cannot be threatened, it cannot be used. It simply is. There is a kind of invincibility in this, so complete, so unmoved, that even the greatest evils pass it by. But it comes at a cost too. Tom's world is small. He will not leave it. He cannot be called upon in the hour of need, not because he will not come, but because he does not hear the call. And perhaps that is why he survives. Not because he is strong, because he is free. He is the untouched note in a song that changed keys long ago. He is the echo of a world that never needed thrones or rings or victory. And so he walks, still, through woods that remember no kings, along paths where time forgets its name, smiling, singing, being, not because he must, but because he always has. There are places in Middle-earth where maps grow quiet, not because they lack detail, but because they lack certainty, paths that shift, forests that remember, hills that seem to breathe. The Old Forest was one such place. To the common traveller, it was a tangle of roots and shadow, haunted by old trees and older tales. But those who stepped deeper, those who listened, felt it. A rhythm not made by wind or beast, but by something older. Something that hummed beneath the soil and whispered in the bark. It was not protection. It was not enchantment. It was song. Not a melody sung aloud, but something deeper. A harmony woven into the fabric of things, into root and rock and stream. It did not guard as a wall guards. It did not resist as a warrior resists. It simply did not yield. And at its heart, in the small, sun-dappled clearing, stood the house of Tom Bombadil. There were no gates, no runes, no wards inscribed in secret languages. But the borders of his realm were real, drawn not in stone, but in being. Tom's world ended where his song did. He had set no limits himself. He had made no claim. And yet the limits existed, and all things, dark and light, seemed to recognize them. Even the ring did. When Frodo entered Tom's house, the ring grew quiet. Its whisper dimmed, its weight lessened. It did not disappear, but it lost its hunger. In that place, it was not wanted, not feared, not resisted, just ignored. And in Middle-earth, there was nothing more foreign than indifference to power. It was not only the ring that faltered. The Nazgûl too came close. Driven by the will of Sauron, their senses twisted by darkness, they followed the trail to the edge of that realm. And there they stopped. The forest did not rise to fight them. The earth did not shake. Tom did not even speak. He looked, and they left. It was not domination. It was presence. And that presence did what swords and spells could not. It unmade the will to conquer. But Tom's borders, for all their power, were also his cage. He said it himself, with a smile. Beyond his land, his knowledge failed. He had no command past the edge of his country. He made no effort to cross it. He had no need. Yet that stillness, that detachment, raised a question even the wise could not answer. Was his power so complete that it needed no expansion? Or was it bound by its very nature, unable to stretch, because it did not seek? This is the paradox of Bombadil. Within his realm, he is master. The trees obey. The rivers laugh. The dead themselves, ancient and cruel, flee his voice. But only within. Outside, the world burns. Towers rise. Kings fall. Armies march toward ruin. And he does not come. Not because he lacks power, but because he lacks purpose in that struggle. To rule nothing, to change nothing, to remain untouched, is its own kind of strength. But it is not the kind that saves the world. The Council of Elrond debated him briefly. Could the ring not be given to Bombadil, hidden where no malice could find it? Would that not end the matter? Gandalf answered, he might take it, if all the free folk of the world begged him. But he would not understand the need. He would not see why it mattered. Because in his world, it didn't. Tom's land was not protected by strength. It was not shielded by force. It was enclosed in a harmony so complete that discord could not thrive. A metaphysical boundary, not drawn, but felt. A place where the world, in all its wars and wounds, simply did not reach. And that was both his blessing and his burden. For what is a realm untouched by evil, if it cannot touch the world in return. The hills know his laughter. The trees dance in his step. The ring itself goes silent in his hand. But the war is beyond the trees, and Tom Bombadil does not leave the song. The Third Age ended with a cry and a silence. The ring was gone. Sauron's tower lay in ruin, his eye extinguished. The Nazgûl, the Nine who had once hunted without pause, vanished with their master's will, scattered shadows fading into a windless void. Gondor rose from ash, and the white tree bloomed again. Songs were sung. Kings were crowned. The world, for a time, healed. But deep in the west, beyond Buckland and its well-trodden paths, past the tangled skirts of the old forest, there was a place untouched. It did not rejoice. It did not mourn. It remained. And in that place, beneath branches that remembered stars the elves had long forgotten, a man in yellow boots stepped out into the morning light. He looked up at the sky, not in awe or grief, but in welcome, as if it had always been that way, as if it always would be. No records speak of him after the fall of Barad-dûr. No elf mentions his name again. No messenger passed through the hedge to ask for news. He was not seen at the Grey Havens, nor counted among the final company. But none dared say he had gone. Some whispered that he had always been there, that before even Melkor first looked upon the void, Tom Bombadil had been walking beneath the early stars, that he had watched the first tree blossom in Cuiviénen and had not been surprised, that he had seen the seas swallow Beleriand and had simply hummed as the tide rolled in, not as a god, not as a judge, but as a witness. He remembered everything, and yet he was bound by nothing. And perhaps that is what the ring could not endure, being unseen, unfeared, unacknowledged. For the ring was not just an object of power, it was a cry for attention, a wound that wanted to spread. And Tom looked at it and saw no wound. There is terror in that. The Nazgûl, chained to Sauron's hunger, fed on fear and submission. They moved not as men, but as absence, consuming sound, light, hope. They did not need to strike. Their approach was enough to unravel resolve. But even they, in the draughts forgotten by ink but not by meaning, turned at the edge of a garden, not by command, not by magic, not by fear. They turned because they saw him, because in a world ruled by conquest, here stood something that could not be conquered. The Nazgûl were kings once. They had ruled cities, commanded legions, but they gave up their names for eternal grasping. And there, in the silence of the forest, stood one who had never grasped at all, and who was therefore beyond their reach. His power did not lie in resistance, but in refusal. Not to fight, but to need no victory. Not to rule, but to sing where others screamed. This is what the wise feared most. Because in a world where every action tips the scale, toward light or shadow, toward fate or ruin, what do you make of the one who does not tip the scale at all? Is he hope, or is he warning? Tom Bombadil never left his land, not because he was afraid of what lay beyond, but because he saw no reason to go. He did not follow. He did not lead. And so the great tides of war passed around him like waves around a stone that does not know it is stone. Yet when the Black Riders came, they stopped. And that moment, undocumented and unexplained, mattered. Because for all the swords raised, for all the fires lit, for all the names lost and kingdoms broken, the most terrifying force the shadows encountered was not war or wisdom. It was a man who did not fear them, who did not want what they wanted, who could not be pulled into their game. And so the scream met a song, and the scream blinked.